I'm sorry, but this school isn't the right fit for your children. Victoria Langford's voice rang out with cold precision. Her perfectly manicured hands folded neatly on the mahogany desk. Her eyes, a piercing shade of icy blue, didn't waver as she looked down at the application folder. Langford Academy has a very refined standard. They meet every requirement, said Aisha Daniels, her voice tight with restrained anger. She sat across from Victoria in a simple navy blazer, her hands clenching the arms of the chair. Her two children, Jordan, age 10, and Maya, age 7, sat silently beside her, dressed in their Sunday best. Their wide brown eyes flicked between their mother and the pale woman behind the desk. Victoria's gaze briefly shifted to the children, and the corner of her lip curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. Yes, well, we have many applicants. We prioritize legacy families. I'm afraid your name doesn't appear in any of our records. Aisha stood slowly, a storm brewing behind her eyes. This isn't about legacy. It's about race. Just say it. Victoria's smile widened. You can think whatever you want, but I assure you, our decision is final. Jordan's hand clutched Aisha's tighter. Mama, let's go. Aisha looked at Victoria for a long moment, her jaw locked tight. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out, her children beside her. But as the heavy oak doors closed behind them, she whispered, "You have no idea who you just insulted." The Langford Academy was an elite private school nestled in the hills of upstate New York, founded by the Langford family over a century ago. Its alumni included senators, tech moguls, and even royalty. Victoria Langford, the current headmistress and sole heir to the Langford legacy, ruled the school with an iron will wrapped in cashmere. She thought she knew power. That evening, Victoria poured herself a glass of Chateau Margaux and sank into her velvet chaise, flipping through the day's files. The Daniels application lay untouched at the bottom of the pile. She paused, staring at the photo of the two black children smiling proudly in their school uniforms. Delusional, she muttered, thinking they'd belong here. Meanwhile, across the city, in a high-rise penthouse, Aisha Daniels stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the lights of Manhattan. She pulled out her phone and dialed. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," came the deep, smooth voice of Elijah Daniels. "How'd it go?" "They turned us down," Aisha said, her voice trembling with fury. There was silence. Then Elijah said, "You sure it was because of—" "Yes." She didn't even try to hide it. He exhaled slowly. "All right, I'm coming back. It's time they know who their father is." The next morning, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled into the Langford Academy's circular drive. The chauffeur stepped out and opened the door. Out stepped Elijah Daniels in a tailored charcoal suit, sunglasses shielding his eyes, and a quiet storm of confidence surrounding him. Victoria was hosting a meeting with donors in the Rose Garden when a young staffer ran to her, breathless, missless. "Langford, there's a man demanding to see you. Says his name is Elijah Daniels." Victoria frowned. "Tell him I'm not available. He's already inside the office." Victoria stormed toward the main building, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. When she flung open the doors to her office, she froze. Elijah stood at the window, hands behind his back. When he turned, she paled. "Elijah Daniels?" she asked, voice faltering, "as in Daniels Enterprises?" "The same," Elijah said coolly. "I believe you met my wife yesterday. You, your children, Jordan and Maya, my kids." Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came out. Elijah stepped closer. "You turned away two children with perfect academic records, glowing recommendations, and ambition in their hearts, because they're black. I didn't know that their father is on Forbes' list, that he owns the largest tech conglomerate in the Northeast, that he donates millions to educational causes every year." His voice sharpened. "You shouldn't have needed to know that to treat them with basic human dignity." "I was following the admissions policy," Victoria said weakly. There are legacy considerations. My children are a legacy, Elijah said, cutting her off. They are the legacy of a man who built everything from nothing. I was born in Brooklyn, no silver spoon, just grit, and now I fund scholarships for a dozen schools better than this one. Victoria was silent. But I didn't come here to beg for a seat, Elijah said. I came to make something clear. He stepped even closer. Langford Academy will either admit Jordan and Maya Daniels with full honors and your personal apology, or you can expect an investigation. I'll fund it myself. You see, I have friends in high places, and I don't mean the country club. Victoria's face drained of color. I didn't realize, she whispered. No, Elijah said, voice low and deadly calm. You did care. Later that afternoon, the school board convened an emergency meeting. Victoria, flustered and pale, addressed the room. I may have made a mistake, she began. Mistake, barked one of the trustees. You turned away Elijah Daniels' children. I didn't know. Doesn't matter, another trustee snapped. Do you realize what this could cost us? Legal action, bad press, donors pulling out. I'll fix it, Victoria said hastily. I'll issue an apology. You better do more than that. That evening, Elijah and Aisha sat at home with their children. The mood was heavy. Daddy, Maya asked softly, why didn't she want us? Elijah leaned down, pulling both children close. Sometimes, baby, people judge us by what they see, but that says more about them than it ever does about you. Jordan looked up. Are we still going to school? Elijah smiled. You're going to get more than that. You're going to change it. The next morning, Langford Academy's website posted an official statement. We are proud to welcome Jordan and Maya Daniels to Langford Academy. We acknowledge past errors in our admissions process and are committed to building a more inclusive future. Below the statement was a photo of Victoria Langford, shaking hands with Elijah Daniels, her face tight with forced politeness. But that wasn't the end. 2 months later, Langford Academy's annual fundraising gala was held in a lavish ballroom downtown. Cameras flashed as wealthy guests mingled. At the center of the event was Elijah Daniels, the surprise keynote speaker. He stepped onto the stage to thunderous applause, wearing a crisp white tuxedo. He paused, scanning the crowd. I wasn't born to this, he began. I wasn't raised in mansions. My first computer was secondhand, missing keys, but I had parents who believed in education, who fought for me. He looked directly at Victoria. My children almost lost a chance, not because they weren't qualified, but because someone decided they didn't belong. That kind of thinking, it's poison, and it stops today. The crowd roared in agreement. Victoria sat frozen in her seat, her empire unraveling thread, by year's end. Langford Academy had rewritten its admissions policy, brought in diversity consultants, and established the Daniels Scholarship, a full-ride program for underrepresented students, funded entirely by Elijah Daniels. But the real victory was quieter. It was Jordan scoring top marks in math and being voted class rep. It was Maya painting a mural in the school hallway that read, "We belong." And it was Aisha, smiling from the bleachers at school assembly, tears in her eyes. Victoria, now a ceremonial figurehead with no real power, watched from the sidelines, her legacy eclipsed by the very people she once dismissed. As for Elijah, he simply said, sometimes the best revenge is letting them watch you rise. The school buzzed with a new energy in the months that followed. The presence of Jordan and Maya Daniels was more than symbolic, it was transformative. They weren't just students, they were a spark that forced everyone at Langford Academy to confront what had long simmered beneath its polished exterior. It began subtly. Jordan aced his science fair project, building a solar-powered irrigation model that stunned even the faculty. A local news outlet covered the story, and Jordan stood proudly in front of his poster, answering questions with the poise of someone twice his age. "Where'd you get the idea?" the reporter asked. "My mom's garden," Jordan replied with a grin. "She said we couldn't afford to water it all summer, so I figured there had to be a way to fix that." Meanwhile, Maya became a beacon in the art department. Her drawings were vibrant, full of life and hope. One day, she brought a painting to class, an image of a little black girl holding hands with a white girl in front of a school gate. Above them, in bright cursive, it read, "Together is how we grow." Miss Caroline, the art teacher, stared at it for a long moment before tears welled up in her eyes. "I want this in the main hall," she whispered. "But that's where the Langford family portrait hangs," said a fellow student. "Exactly," Caroline replied. "It's time the walls reflect the future, not just the past." Victoria Langford felt the shift like a slow earthquake. She watched from her corner office as students she'd once considered beneath the school's pedigree thrived in ways she never imagined. At a board meeting, she tried to assert control. "This school is losing its identity," she snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "We were elite for a reason." Elijah, now the school's largest private donor, leaned forward slowly. "You mean exclusion was the reason?" "This school was built by my ancestors," Victoria hissed, "and it will be rebuilt by their better descendants," Elijah replied calmly. "You can be part of that, or you can watch from the sidelines." The board voted later that week. Victoria was quietly removed from all decision-making roles and transitioned to a ceremonial title, Chairwoman Emeritus. It was a gilded cage, a symbol stripped of substance. One afternoon, Aisha stood on the sidelines of the Langford Academy soccer field, watching Jordan race down the pitch. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Miss S. Carpenter, one of the senior faculty members. "I owe you an apology," the older woman said softly. Aisha raised a brow. "For what?" "I didn't stand up when your kids were turned away. I stayed silent." Aisha nodded slowly, emotion creeping into her voice. "Silence is how injustice survives." Miss S. Carpenter looked out at the field. "Well, not anymore." At the end of year ceremony, Elijah was asked to give the keynote again. The auditorium was packed. Students, parents, media. The Daniels family sat front and center. Elijah stepped to the podium and looked out at the sea of young faces. "I grew up in a neighborhood where no one expected us to make it out, where dreams died young and fast. But here's the thing, someone believing in you can be the difference between fading and flying." He turned to his kids. "Jordan, Maya, you're already flying." The crowd erupted in applause. And then, something unexpected happened. Victoria Langford stood. She made her way to the front of the stage, heels echoing in the silence. She turned to Elijah and extended her hand. "I was wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "I saw only what I wanted to see. But your family, your children, they've changed this place." Elijah looked at her for a long moment. Then, with a nod, he shook her hand. Not for her, but for every child watching. Later that evening, the Daniels family sat on their penthouse balcony. The city sparkled below them. "Mama," Maya said sleepily, curled in Aisha's lap. "Does this mean we won?" Aisha kissed her daughter's forehead. "We didn't just win, baby. We showed them who we are." "And who are we?" Jordan asked. Elijah smiled, his voice firm and full of pride. "We're the future, and we don't knock on doors anymore. We build our own." They sat there for a long time, wrapped in warmth, strength, and the unshakable truth that no amount of wealth or prejudice could ever dim their light again. Because legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. And the Daniels legacy had just begun. The following semester, Langford Academy stood transformed, not just in appearance, but in spirit. The glossy banners of tradition, excellence, integrity still hung across the entrance. But now beside them were new words in bold gold lettering: diversity, justice, innovation. Inside the main hall, where portraits of grim-faced Langfords had once loomed without interruption, Maya's mural now dominated the east wall. It was more than a painting, it was a statement. A colorful crowd of children from every background stood arm in arm in front of a reimagined Langford Academy, their smiles bright, their futures limitless. At the center of it all stood two children with warm brown skin, Maya and Jordan. Visitors stopped and stared. Some cried, Others smiled quietly and moved on, thoughtful. In one classroom, Jordan sat beside his new best friend, Ethan Chen, arguing over coding syntax while their teacher looked on proudly. Jordan had started a coding club with Elijah's help, and within weeks, the group had doubled in size, attracting kids who never thought computer science could be for them. We're building a game where you rescue books from a burning library, Jordan explained to the local news during a feature about the club, because knowledge is power, and some people still try to burn it. At the back of the room, Elijah watched silently, pride swelling in his chest. Meanwhile, Aisha had found her own path at Longford. She was offered a seat on the school's newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Board. At first, she hesitated. She'd never imagined herself part of an institution like Langford, but she accepted not to blend in, but to lead change from within. The first order of business, an anonymous reporting system for racial discrimination and bias. The second, mandatory bias training for all faculty and staff. When Victoria caught wind of this, she stormed into the board meeting uninvited. "This school is losing its character," she declared, her voice sharp and trembling. Aisha stood slowly. "No, this school is finally finding it." The room fell silent. Aisha's voice softened, but its power remained. Langford isn't about keeping others out. Not anymore. It's about preparing kids to enter a world that needs every ounce of brilliance we can give it. Elijah, seated beside her, nodded. "You want a legacy? Help us build one worth remembering." That year, applications to Langford from students of color tripled. Scholarships expanded. Outreach programs were created with Elijah's company leading the tech initiative. One day, as the Daniels family pulled up to the school gates in their car, a woman with 2 young daughters hesitated near the entrance. She looked nervous, clutching an admissions folder. Aisha rolled down the window. "First time here." The woman blinked, surprised. "Yes, we weren't sure if we'd be welcome." Elijah leaned over with a warm smile. "You are. We were too once. But the door's open now." The woman's eyes widened. "Wait, are you?" Aisha laughed gently. "We're just parents, just like you." The little girls waved shyly at Jordan and Maya. "Wanna walk in with us?" Maya offered. The girls nodded, and the 5 of them walked through the gates, together past the marble lions. Under the towering arch that once stood as a symbol of exclusivity, now it stood for something else entirely. On Founders' Day, a tradition held sacred by the Langford family for generations, a new plaque was unveiled in the courtyard. It read, "To the Daniels family, whose courage turned walls into bridges, and whose children reminded us all what it means to belong." Below the inscription were etched the silhouettes of a boy and a girl, Jordan and Maya, arms outstretched toward the sky. Victoria stood off to the side as the crowd applauded. She was smaller now, not just in power, but in presence. Yet she clapped, quietly, respectfully, maybe even sincerely. After the ceremony, she approached Elijah. "I was raised to believe certain things," she said, "but I've been unlearning." Elijah nodded. "Unlearning is where real education begins." Victoria looked down. "Your children, they've changed this school." Elijah smiled. "They're just getting started." One rainy afternoon, months later, Jordan was called to the principal's office. Nervous, he walked in to find a man in a suit standing beside the head of school. "Jordan Daniels," said the man, extending his hand. "I'm from the Department of Education. We're launching a National Youth Advisory Council. Your name came up several times." "Me?" Jordan blinked. "You represent what we're looking for. Intelligence, integrity, leadership. You in?" Jordan grinned. "Can my sister join too?" The man laughed. "We were hoping she would." When Jordan told his parents, Aisha hugged him so tightly he couldn't breathe, and Elijah looked away just long enough to wipe a tear. On the last day of the school year, Maya stood at the top of the stairs as students filled the hallway. She looked out over the crowd, now a swirl of colors and voices and laughter. This was not the Langford that once told her she didn't belong. This was her school now. She took a deep breath and raised her hand. "Hey, everyone." The hallway went quiet. Maya smiled. "We're not done changing the world yet. So don't get comfortable. Laughter and applause followed. And as the students began pouring outside for summer, Jordan walked beside her. You really think we changed it? She looked at him. No, Jordan, we didn't change Langford. She turned and pointed to the students behind them. They did. We just opened the door. Years later, the Daniels name was known across the country. Jordan became a tech innovator and education reformer, founding a nonprofit that gave underprivileged kids access to STEM programs. Maya grew into a globally celebrated artist, her works displayed in museums and schools around the world. But every year, without fail, they returned to Langford for the alumni reunion. And every year, a new mural was added beside Maya's first one, each one painted by students of every background, telling stories of triumph, unity, and hope. Langford Academy had become what it never thought it could be. And all it took was one rich woman saying no, and the right family showing her why she should have said yes. Because legacy, in the end, is not about names carved in stone or money passed through generations. It's about the lives you lift and the doors you leave open behind you. One crisp autumn morning, several years later, a news van pulled into the Langford Academy parking lot. Reporters, camera crews, and journalists bustled out, adjusting equipment and murmuring with excitement. Today wasn't just any day, it was the official unveiling of the new Daniels Center for Equity and Innovation, a state-of-the-art building that would stand as a monument to progress, purpose, and a very public redemption. Inside the building, sunlight poured through tall glass windows, casting rainbows across the polished marble floors. The walls were lined with interactive panels displaying stories of trailblazing students, revolutionary tech initiatives, and artistic movements started right within Langford's halls. At the center of the atrium stood a life-size bronze sculpture of two children holding hands, one with a backpack full of books, the other carrying a paintbrush. At the base, a simple engraving read, "Dream, Dare, Do," in honor of Jordan and Maya Daniels students, faculty, parents, and press crowded into the space, eyes wide with awe. Elijah and Aisha stood off to the side, hand in hand, their faces quiet but filled with overwhelming pride. Aisha leaned in. Do you remember that day? Elijah smiled. The day Victoria slammed the admissions folder shut. No. The day our kids opened the door anyway. Jordan, now in his early 20s, took the stage. His hair was neatly styled, his suit impeccably tailored, but his voice still held that same determined warmth he'd had as a 10-year-old. Langford wasn't made for kids like me, he began, glancing around at the students in the crowd. At least, not at first. But sometimes, history gives you a choice. You can break under the weight of a closed door, or you can break the door down. Laughter and applause erupted. And, if you're lucky, Jordan continued, you'll find a way to hold it open for others. That's what this building means. Innovation isn't just technology, it's inclusion. It's reimagining what excellence looks like. He paused, then added, excellence looks like every single face I see here today. Then Maya took the mic, taller now, with long braids and paint still occasionally under her fingernails. She beamed. People once said, we didn't belong. But guess what? We didn't just belong, we bloomed. And now it's your turn. She pointed toward the student body. Your stories matter. So paint them, build them, code them, speak them. And don't ever let anyone tell you that your light isn't bright enough. She stepped down into the crowd and hugged a teary-eyed girl in the front row, a freshman, the first from her family to attend private school. Maya had mentored her all year. Aisha watched and whispered to Elijah, This is better than revenge. Elijah nodded. This is legacy. In the months that followed, the Daniels Center became the heart of the school. Students from marginalized communities found mentorship programs and creative platforms waiting for them. There were hackathons, international art exchanges, and social justice symposiums. Universities from across the country partnered with Langford, eager to tap into this new model of elite education, one driven not by exclusion, but by expansion. Victoria Langford, now retired and living quietly in a country estate, watched the opening ceremony on television. Alone, she held her teacup with trembling hands, eyes glistening as she watched Maya wrap an arm around her brother and shout, "To the future." The anchor's voice echoed over the footage. What was once a bastion of exclusivity has become a symbol of change. Led by the very children it once rejected, Victoria set the cup down. For a long time, she sat in silence. Then she rose, walked over to a drawer, and pulled out the dusty folder marked Daniels, Jordan, and Maya. Inside were their original applications, the same ones she had once dismissed with a smug smile. Now, she traced their names gently with a fingertip, lips quivering. "I was wrong," she whispered to the quiet room. So wrong. She didn't expect forgiveness, but she hoped, at least, that the world she once tried to shape had been reshaped by better hands. One summer evening, a decade after that fateful rejection, Jordan stood atop the stage at a national education conference. Behind him, a massive banner read, "Reimagining Access, Equity in Elite Spaces." He adjusted his microphone and looked into the sea of educators, lawmakers, and innovators. "My story isn't unique," he began. "It's only famous because someone said no loudly enough for the world to hear." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. But what made the difference wasn't fame or fortune. It was love. It was my mother, who refused to bow. My father, who showed up not with a threat, but with truth. And a school that eventually chose to listen. He glanced at the front row, where Maya sat beside their parents, sketching the audience in her notebook. The question we have to ask ourselves isn't who belongs. It's how do we make room for everyone who does. He paused. And when you start asking that, you change the world. Thunderous applause followed, and afterward, a woman approached him. She was young, dressed in modest clothes, her accent soft. "My name's Keisha," she said shyly. "My son's applying to Langford next year. He's obsessed with robotics. But we don't have much." Jordan knelt to meet her eyes. "You have enough," he said. "You have a story. And now Langford knows how to listen." He handed her a card. "Tell him to email me. We'll make sure he's got a shot." Back in New York, Langford Academy was more than a school. It was a beacon. The Daniels story had become part of its curriculum. A case study in ethics and equity taught not just to students, but to faculty nationwide. The painting Maya had created as a girl was now permanently preserved behind glass. Each year, she returned to touch it up, to add a new detail, another child, another dream, another symbol of progress. On the 20th anniversary of their admission, the Daniels family gathered beneath the mural. A young tour guide, perhaps 14, led a group of new families through the hallway. "These two kids here," she said, pointing up at the mural, "they changed everything. Before them, this school didn't even know it needed changing." Elijah chuckled. "Did you hear that?" Jordan smiled. "Yeah, sounds like we did all right." Maya leaned on his shoulder, whispering, "Think they're ready to carry it forward." Aisha wrapped her arms around all of them and said softly, "They're already doing it." And outside, past the gates that once denied them entry, a new family stood at the threshold, holding hands, hearts pounding, dreams glowing in their eyes. This time, the gates opened wide, and the future walked in.